I'm excited to have today some real just heroes, honestly, of mine. And I don't say that just because it's a nice thing to say. Legitimately, I've looked up to and admired this couple for a long time, even going back to my days in youth, actually, before Kingswood and Call to Ministry. I mean, Mike, you were a part of the formation of my faith growing up. And, I think of times in actually Kings Valley, what was the big picture rally? I feel like you spoke at that one time. And when I close my eyes and I think about the spiritual mountaintops of my youth, I see Present Reality and Mike McNeil and Dan Lamus, and those are very fond memories.
I have fond memories of those.
Yeah,
those were great days.
It was a special time. It really was. God was doing something special and marked a lot of people, and I think I was one of those kids, and I'm grateful for that. So I'm grateful to have you guys here.
Yeah, our pleasure.
And we want to get, first and foremost, we were just saying before we even went live here, we don't know your story, really. I mean, I've heard your testimony a little bit, Mike, but not of how you guys came together, your marriage, your journey. Give us the ABCs of Mike and Colleen McNeil. Help us. Let's hear it. Let's hear the marriage story, how it came together.
Well, I was. We met at a like high school bus stop, and so yeah.
Day
So we're
of high
like
school
so.
for me.
First for her, I was in grade 12. She was in grade 10. So I was like, I was trying to get to some grade 10 before they realized that wasn't cool, right? So I was like trying to convince them on that first day. So no, but I chased her for about a year, and she did the I just want to be friends thing.
So
He
she
was a
figured
good
out.
friend.
She figured out she didn't get there early enough.
And then I just gave up, and I
Got
started.
a girlfriend.
I gave up and started dating somebody else. If I had have known that was what was going to work, I would have done that much sooner. But I started dating somebody else, and then she was like, "Oh, maybe I missed that attention," and so we started.
I think maybe I did like you. Okay. So
Maybe it was more than friends.
Yeah.
So we've been together forever. Like we're going on, it's like 40 years this year.
wow,
Married 40 years.
Married 40 years, but,
45.
like, yeah.
together.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
So we've gone through all that, and we basically. She was 15 and I was 17,
Yeah.
so we've
Non-Christian.
gone through like all of these phases,
So you
kind of
guys
together.
weren't believers when you met.
No.
So, and then you found each other. And then when did you get married? When did you find Christ? And how did that all kind of flesh itself out?
Well, we got married in 1981, and I found Christ in 1982.
Okay.
I was not the woman he married. Me first.
You switched the vows on him.
Oh
Yeah. I was just I was just a party boy. I was just like a good time Charlie, just like
So was I.
going through life, just having fun. But the party lifestyle was getting kind of empty for both of us. And then it was actually,
Charlene McKenzie.
it was Charlene McKenzie.
Wow.
Christ.
Kept inviting her to church, and then I was off in Fredericton in my master's program, and I would come home on the weekends because she had a good job here in St. John, and so I came home one weekend and she was basically like a different person.
Wow.
It was powerful.
Then we proceeded to
You
have
had a
really-
radical conversion.
Radical conversion. I was a heavy drinker. I never took another drink. My mouth was filthy. I don't think I cursed and swore any longer, but I had smoked since I was 8.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
Since you were 8. Oh my
Yes,
No.
sir.
And I found that the most difficult habit.
I bet you had.
But when I knelt at the altar and Jack and Charlene led me to Christ, it was powerful. Like it was such a moving experience. I felt the love of God so tangible all over me. I knew I would never be the same.
Wow.
And then I came home and tried to tell him what happened, and I couldn't articulate it. I just said, "You got to get saved."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Saved? We're all saved. We live in Canada." And I was like, No. you saved. And he's like, what are you talking about?
My attitude was like, you can be as religious as you want as long as it doesn't affect your lifestyle.
Right.
Like, you know,
Yeah, or your lifestyle.
yeah. It's like, I'm a Christian, we're all Christians.
it's great.
That kind of thing. So.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he said to me, and this was 2 weeks after, he said, so you're trying to tell me you love this Jesus more than you love me? And at this point, it was 6 years in. We are 6 years in, 1 year married. And I looked him straight in the face and I said, I absolutely do. And you better climb on board because I'm not giving up on this.
Wow.
And he was like, whoa.
So how did
how did that happen?
Well, I was like,
ultimatums don't
I mean,
always go
basically, our marriage at that point was like we were heading in. I mean, she was going off to church every chance she got, and I was like drinking more, going off to clubs and all of that kind of stuff. And then, and it was a Friday night, and I was going to go out with my friends, and she was going to a church service at Kings Valley.
Wow.
You know, when they met
Jimmy
in the
Johnson.
gymnasium.
Okay, yeah.
And so she was like, I'm going out to see this evangelist guy, and I was like, yeah, whatever. So I was flicking around on TV, and I came across the local cable channel, and they were interviewing this pastor on there, like on the local cable. And she was in another room, and so I yelled out to her, like, hey, this pastor's really funny. If you're going to see a guy like him, I would go with you. And she poked her head in the door and said, that's the guy that I'm going to see.
Oh, wow.
And so I found myself, like, against my will on a Friday night, I was walking into a gymnasium, like full of, like my only venture into an evangelical church. Like I'd never been, like my concept of church was really like just kind of dead, like high church kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so, and it was a stereotypical Billy Graham story. Like I walked in there with a bad attitude, just like not gonna listen or do anything. And then he started preaching. The whole room faded away. It was like he was talking right to me. Wow. And at the end, he was like, you know, if this has meant anything to you, stand up and come down front here and pray. And I'd never been in a church that did anything like that.
Right.
So in my head, I'm thinking, nobody's going to do that. Who's going to stand up and make a fool of themselves? Yeah. And I'm standing up as I'm
While
thinking.
you're thinking
While
that.
I'm thinking that, I'm standing up and I'm walking forward, and I'm the only one. I'm the only one.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I kneel down, and it's kind of like, I pray, God, if you're real, and then it was like, just like this presence, right?
Huge.
I can
And I couldn't.
I know I have goosebumps.
Like I had been very vocally like anti-God, very vocal like against it, and I could not speak. Like I literally lost my voice.
You're not a super emotional guy.
No.
No, and so I literally, you know, all these people were coming up to me, and I was just like, I couldn't say anything.
He couldn't speak. He couldn't speak, and I was so excited because I felt like one of the old gray-haired ladies in the church that has waited for years, and it's been 6 months.
Right.
And I'm like, I told you, what are you feeling? And he's like,
Wow.
he couldn't talk. He literally couldn't talk.
A couple questions before we, because this is just helpful, and two things I want to talk about with you guys. If we get to the other stuff, great.
Right.
There's a question of what did that shift in Christ entering both of you do to your marriage? I want to hear about that, and I want Colleen to speak to. I think we have, you know, I know there are people listening who one's a believer and one's not.
So, what advice would you give to a spouse that is?
You know that feeling of like, oh, if you could just get it.
The Lord, first of all, the Lord was so incredibly real to both of us. We felt him in such a tangible, real way that he totally revamped our lives, like totally changed our lives. We were ready to sell everything and go to Africa within weeks. And there was a pastoral shift in our church. Pastor Mel had just taken over, Mel Norton. And he was trying to be polite and tell us, you know, kids, this is awesome. I can't believe you're doing so well, but you kind of need training to go on the mission field, because we were going to go on the mission field. And God just, he never changed our personalities, because we're both fiery people.
Yep.
We're pretty fiery people. And we had a lot of submitting to the Lord to do. But the thing that I've seen over the years, too, has been as we've invited God in, he's helped us to learn to submit, first of all, to him, and then to each other. And because I came from such dysfunction, heaped in dysfunction, that the Lord has been able to teach me and change me, and teach him and change him. And if I could say one thing to people who are waiting for their spouse, that are married, I mean, that for me it was only 6 months, 7 months. It felt like an eternity, but I had the wisest of women, and Charlene McKenzie just kept saying, you need to pray, Colleen. You need to be exactly who God wants you to be, but you need to pray. Don't preach at him, but pray. And when you're convicted of something, you hold to your convictions, but you need to pray for him. So every single Sunday night was testimony night at church. And I stood up every single Sunday night and asked for prayer for my smoking, because I still smoked, and I desperately wanted to change. And please pray for my husband. I just want him to know Jesus so badly. And one night I sat down with him and I said, it's only a matter of time before you get saved. And he said, oh, really? And I said,
It's a challenge.
I said, I have multiple churches praying for you. And he was so disgusted and mad at me.
I was like,
how dare you?
Yeah, I was like, people I don't know are praying for me? That's just, this is what I said. That's disgusting. Like, I don't want those people knowing about my life.
Yeah, I imagine that was
where I was at.
offensive. Yeah.
But it is the power of prayer.
Yeah.
And I serve a God of miracles, and I've always believed that from the instant he entered my life. And I just think, God, there's nothing that's too difficult for you. And he's proved that over and over and over again. And no matter, what we've walked through, God's just done an incredible thing, because really, if anybody's marriage shouldn't have made it, it probably should have been ours. But
yeah, we would have scored high on all those, kind of things that could break up a marriage.
Yeah. Do you think you would have made it without like like Christ kind of taking over your lives?
I don't think so. He probably would, because he tells me he adores me all the time. But I'm thinking, I probably would have.
Her job has always been way harder than my job, I think. So.
Did you guys notice, again, just because you're a Christian marriage doesn't mean, and we're going to talk about conflict, doesn't mean that all the issues go away. But did you notice a shift in just like the atmosphere of your marriage after you got saved, Mike? Did that change your relational dynamic at all?
Yeah, and I mean, gradually looking at it over time, we kind of had the John and Yoko thing going on. Like I was like the artsy guy who was doing his master's in creative writing, and she had a good job, so she was working, and God eventually kind of brought us around to and she just always wanted to work and wasn't sure she wanted to have kids and any of that stuff, and God brought it around to like a switch where we're like the most traditional roles. And she was a stay-at-home mom, I was the breadwinner, but we didn't start I was like woke way before before woke was woke. I was all in on all that stuff. Like growing up, I was raised kind of left-wing and radical.
Right.
So the shift is in a different direction for most people.
Yeah. Wow. Well, today I'd love to kind of take that forward into our discussion about conflict and how to navigate, especially in our relationships, the sparks that often fly, and not the romantic ones. Well,
they are connected, though, right?
I think you're right. You're right.
The sparks run in both directions.
They do. Well, and that's actually worth reminding ourselves once in a while. Is the reason that I get so worked up by you is because I get so worked up by you.
Right.
And the people that are the closest to us can drive us the craziest and drive us the craziest. Right? So, It's all, yeah. Anyway, that's a good point. But you guys seem to work really well together. Have they described? So this is what they described in the book a time where Marcia actually technically worked for Kevin,
Right.
And didn't go super well. And I don't think that would work super good for us either.
Not if you were my boss. It would have worked well.
Not so much.
No.
No, but do you guys work well together? Like as far as in a formal environment?
I think we've like worked out what our roles are, and and over a long period of time, you kind of know you just learn
Right.
how to work together. We both have fairly like strong personalities, and so there's a potential for conflict. And I grew up in a house where like the main form of communication was fighting. Like where it's like not. I just mean like everything was out on the table, and you just like said whatever you thought.
Yeah.
And you could be really brutal with one another, and
All gas.
and then it would just be like 5 minutes later it was gone, right?
Yeah.
And she grew up in a house where everybody had to be really careful with each other, and and so we had to learn how to navigate, because I was blurting everything out,
Right.
and hurting her feelings without even realizing I was, and then she would expect me to read her mind.
Yes.
Right, and I was just used to everything being like, just put it all on the table, and
If you don't tell me, how am I supposed to?
yeah, you're right, right, and so,
Yeah.
but we, so in the early years there was probably like more of that.
Yes. Yes, for sure. And I was kind of a feminist and very unsubmissive.
So you guys were super woke, no question.
Oh yeah, like we were,
Yeah, we've had to work through, and we've never had counseling. Other than the Holy Spirit,
right,
we've had each other and a few boxing matches. And when we fight, we can really do well. Like we throw water at each other, and we still do.
Wow.
We chase each other, and it's only been 2
Well,
weeks
there's two
since we had a
things.
good one.
We got the right couple in here today for this conversation.
So would you recommend that for couples in conflict?
everybody's relationship is different, I think, and you have
Yes.
to kind of work out like what.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, there's basically two things. It's like I always tell Colleen, like, I just want you to know up front, I consider everything you do flirting, and so I'm just like, and you actually
You
get
coming on
more,
to me?
like you actually get cuter when you get angry. So it's like totally, it disarms me, and I can't fight with you very long because it's like it just doesn't work for me. So.
And that is exactly what he says. And then, of course, how
That
So
makes you
does
matter.
how do you be serious, right? It's like he's like, you're way too cute. I'm like, oh,
Now, is that your way of sneakily ending the argument?
No, I genuinely mean it.
yeah.
So that must diffuse it then. If he says
Oh.
something like that when
Oh.
you're mad, do you stop being angry?
I do, because he really does mean it. And the awesome thing about the Lord, I came from a family that my parents really never got their marriage straightened out, and ended up both of them becoming Christian and still didn't get things settled well. They always lived under the same roof, but they really just put up with one another. And there was a lot of trust issues. And so I came into marriage, he probably didn't realize it, but I came in with a lot of trust issues. And the Lord knew when I came to him that I needed somebody to tell me how much he loved me, that he adored me. And I've never seen this man look at another woman ever. And I used to watch for it because, I was like so untrusting.
Yeah.
I was sure that everybody was like what all they, my mother told me all men are like this. And so I grew up with thinking all men are like this.
Yeah.
But man, I'll tell you what, I got myself a special one. And God just has given us the most incredible life. It's not an easy life. It's absolutely not an easy life. But let me tell you, I just find that when we both submit to the Lord, if we can keep him first and keep our priorities with God, then it seems like everything he says and does and everything I say and do, it just, there's not really an issue. Now we have, differences of opinions because we're very opinionated people, and sometimes I'm like, you are so opinionated. Oh,
Only you.
I'll say you're such a strong personality, and he'll say you are too, and I don't believe I was before. I think when the Lord matched me with him, I had to step it up and become a strong personality in order to have a voice with him. But it's been great. It's been a
Yeah, and like when we were in those like early child rearing years and going through, because we're kind of at the other end of that now, but there were some times where you just have to decide, like we're like no matter what, we're a united front. Mm-hmm. Like we decide as a couple, whatever's coming at us, no matter what in private, no matter what discussions we have, like we're a united front. We always face things together.
What are some of those values like? I think of you guys, you can't tell a book by its cover, and people wouldn't know. You guys have dealt with stuff. You guys have gone through challenges, going through challenges even. You've got kids that live all over the world, which can be heavy as parents and grandparents. What are the values, I guess, like, yes, obviously Christ and your faith, but what are kind of some of those things that like we've just always kind of held the line on this, and it's proven to be solid for us. It's kept us, alive, healthy, loving each other, well-adjusted kids. What's been some of the secrets for you guys as a married couple in all that?
Yeah, like one of the problems, I guess, is like every cliche that we could say as Christians is actually true.
Yeah.
Like we feel like it is. And when you say them, like
I wish I had a better
people
answer
go,
than
"What?"
Jesus.
And it's because they're simple, but they're not easy. But they really are.
It's good.
They really are simple, and we just like we made up our mind like really early on, like we were going to be a ministry family. Yeah. Like our whole family, like we're all committed. Yeah. We're going to raise our kids committed to serving God, and we're going to. And so when I was in those really crazy, we talked about the youth ministry years. There was a period there where I was just like so incredibly busy, and in that I realized like I just gave Colleen like you have veto power. Okay. If I'm too busy, if I need to cancel something, like if I'm away from the house too much and the kids. Like I give you permission to step in at any point, and just like say no. You need to. And she hardly ever used it because we both had the same values for ministry, but we were just like we were always on the same page about it. It wasn't. Like
I felt valued that he would allow me to do that.
Right.
And we traveled 7 weeks on the road every summer with all 4 kids. For years.
A lot of potential for conflict.
Yes.
No doubt.
and we didn't have enough money to stay in hotels, so we had to find homes to, former students we would stay with, which we had incredible times. But, I mean, who wants 6 people moving in with them for a few days all along, our travels? But it was the best life ever. And my children grew up having fantastic summers. We would come back and they would go to school, and the teacher would say, "So write about your summer." And my kids would write, "Was in Harlem leading children, other children to Christ." And I on Parent Teacher Day, one of the teachers said to me, "I think your daughter has a little bit of a big imagination." And I was like, "Well, why?" And she said, "Well, she wrote this paper about being in Harlem and kids to Jesus." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's what we do for the summer." And she's like,
word.
"Oh." Yeah. So my children had very, we always believed, and the thing that with his wisdom, he always said, our children are going to fit into our lives. We're not fitting into their lives. Yeah. We're not running hither and thither, taking kids everywhere. They will fit into our lives. Yeah. And so when our children grew up and went to school and married and have gone off, we still have a marriage. Yeah. Right. Because nothing's really changed for us. Yes, our children are now married kids and everything. And
we are now teenagers with money, basically. That's what the empty nest really is.
That's right.
Oh, wow.
That sounds great. I think that's worth speaking to for a second, because I think about, like, I know, I'm friends with Rachel and Chris. They're my peers, and we went through college together and stuff. But like all of your kids are serving the Lord, building their own families, and yet you guys you take the typical approach to parenting today, and it's how can I protect my kids from everything? And you guys didn't so much do that. And like speak to, like, because I think there's a lot of parents, like, even in our stage with kids from 12 to 5 years old, and that's the fight is like, do we take them out of public school? Do we shelter them? Like how have you guys thought about bringing up your kids, and what advice would you give to, the bubble wrap parents of today? That really, we fight that even. Like how much do we let our kids experience, and how much do we shelter them from it? And
Yeah, I just preached at a church on the weekend, like online on the weekend. But there was an illustration that I used. It was from Biosphere 2, which is out in Oracle, Arizona. It was like a scientific experiment, a big dome where they were trying to control the whole environment, and so they had these trees, and the trees grew really fast. But before they reached full maturity, they would fall over, and they couldn't figure out why. And the reason why they found out eventually was there was no wind in Biosphere 2, so there was no resistance. And trees actually have a thing called stress bark, which is like develops, like when the wind comes against the tree, it develops a stress bark on the outside, and its roots go deeper. And without that, the tree, and I was like, when I read that, I was like, that's what we're doing to our children. Like we're not giving. We have to. Obviously, you're not just going to throw them in the deep end of the pool, but you've got to expose them to things that develops that resilience.
Yep.
And so we used to get called out by parents like, how could you take your kids like into the middle of New York City, and and they're around like drug addicts, and I was like, you know what? Like everybody's kids are going to be exposed to drugs in some way. Like my kids are going to see the result of like what happens when you do drugs and your life is totally destroyed. Other people's kids are going to see it glamorized on TV.
Yep.
And so you know what I mean? Like so you expose them to things, but in a way that supports what the Bible says instead of undercutting it.
Yeah, and you guys have seen the Lord really bring fruit out of that. I mean, again, like you have well-adjusted kids and ministry kids that, serving in the church, and you have one daughter in Haiti. And, so that's really encouraging and challenging for those of us that are in the midst of it right now and aren't.
I mean, it's obviously a balance. Like
It is.
There is a protection that happens, but you've got to gradually like release them into the world.
Well, and I think maybe the encouragement that people could take though from hearing you guys on the other side of it is, I do think there are some winds of culture right now that are pushing against the average kid that I didn't even grow up with.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
But I think the good news is with the right like godly parenting and getting involved and walking through it with them, it can actually produce a more rooted tree, so to speak, right? Like it's not just a disadvantage that my kids have to grow up processing things that I never had to process.
Yeah.
It can be a real advantage. They could be.
That's right.
And one of our core values is that like serving Jesus is more fun than anything else.
Yeah.
It is.
And so I was like, I'm gonna make like my kids are going to want to come with me instead of being with their friends.
Right.
I'm going to make serving Jesus more exciting than what their friends are doing.
Yeah.
So that they want to do that instead of
And it worked.
And they're still that way.
Yeah.
We are some of the favorite people that they want to be with, and we have a great time as a family.
Yeah.
We love our girls. The thing that, having grown up in a non-Christian home, when I got pregnant, I was never going to have children, but when I got pregnant, as soon as I got saved, I knew right away. I knew that I was supposed to have children. And Charlene McKenzie said, you can't say that to him. You said, when you guys got married, you weren't going to have kids. You can't flip the switch until he gets saved. And as soon as he got saved, he came to the same conclusion. So within, not long after he got saved, I ended up getting pregnant. And I remember being pregnant and just saying, Lord, I so want girls. I wanted girls. And he gave me 4 girls. Wow. And I said, Lord, my one and only prayer is that they'll love you with all their heart, and serve you. Because he, oh, Lord, he'd made such a profound change in my life. And it was so real. And he had delivered me from so many dysfunctional things. And I just wanted so desperately for my children to know the power of God.
Yeah.
And he's been so faithful. Like, wouldn't change that prayer for anything. Now, when, I had to leave a child in Haiti when she was only 23 years old and say goodbye on the plane, knowing that who knows what her life will be like. And she's been there 7 years now, still serving the, loving Haiti. That's her home. People say, well, when this happens and that happens and she moves back home. And I said, no, you don't understand. She calls that her home. That's her home. That's where her son lives. That's where they live. And her husband. And they've, built a community for themselves there. And it's more dangerous to be out of the will of God than to be in the will of God and in Haiti.
Yes, you're right.
So I know that the Lord promises to be faithful in our lives, but he doesn't promise to keep us safe.
Yep.
Safety is not an issue. Character building is.
Yep.
And however he chooses to build that character in each of my children and myself and my husband, then I have to accept what the Lord wants.
So pray for your kids and pray for your spouse and realize that following Jesus isn't safe. It's good.
Oh,
it's like
good.
That's like the C.S. Lewis, who said anything about safe.
Yeah. And honestly, I think everybody's looking for, we tend to look for an easy, comfortable life, and it just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Like I think our two choices are like.
Ron, can you snip that? please just.
I think our two choices are, life can be hard because you're serving Jesus, or life can be hard because you're not serving Jesus. But life is going to be hard. So your only choice is at least I want to be in trouble for doing the right thing rather than the wrong thing. Right?
And trusting that Jesus can redeem and actually make the hard into something glorious.
Yeah, something meaningful.
Yeah, that's so. We should talk about conflict. This has been so good. This has been so good. But I do think this is important because I don't want to miss this last thing in the book. And I know there are marriage isn't safe. And it does bring out conflict and stress. And I think that's actually God's mechanism for growing us as individuals even and growing us together. And so, they talk about choosing how you react to conflict. And specifically they said there's an old John Maxwell analogy of there's two buckets. You can throw gas on it or you can throw water on it. There's one of two ways to react when you butt heads. And we've used the gas here and there.
Just a few times. Yeah.
I was probably of all the chapters most convicted by this one.
I wonder why.
I can't imagine that for you.
Yeah. We're both a little fiery too.
Yeah. Well, and we want to win.
Yes, and we both are always right.
Yeah.
Which is a problem.
Yeah, it is. But they basically said there's those two reactions, and then they talked about some of the scriptures that the Bible talks about that are really challenging. But a soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Fools give vent to their rage, but the wise. Why are you laughing at that? But the wise bring calm in the end. A hot-tempered man stirs up strife.
Notice you said man.
Yep, I do. I let it be. But he who is slow to anger quiets contention. A man with self-control, just the patriarchy.
The Lord
is like a city broken into and left without walls. Well, let's just an aside for my own curiosity, because Mike, you're quite a, you've got some really good opinions on just the modern realities. And the water bucket is not something that culture has right now at all. We live in a time where everyone's going around with flamethrowers.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And how how would you speak maybe to the cultural way to deal with offense I think of cancellation and escalation and all this stuff, and how God calls us to a different way.
Yeah, well, yeah, we're part of a different kingdom and we have a different spirit, right? And so
Right.
and so, but in the middle of all that, especially if you value truth, I think there's so much. There's just such a battle for truth right now that it's easy to start just reacting to things.
Right.
And what I love that line about Jesus where it says that he only did what he saw the Father doing. And so like his vision of God the Father was always in between him and whatever was happening. And so that's what I try to do is to put a pause on my reaction, because I'm I come from a family of reactors. Like we can like if you look up like my family name McNeil, it's like the Scottish crest is victory or death. That's what it literally means. And when I was researching my family like name, the first line that comes up on the internet is like the McNeils fought with everything and everyone in Scotland. That's
Wow.
that's literally what it says.
I bet you the guy on Braveheart that was like my island. That guy's a McNeil.
So it comes very naturally to me to want to react, and so I've had to like train myself to go, like I'm not going to just react to, even if it's like a right reaction, like even if something is untrue and I want to react to it, it's like to pause and to try to see Jesus in between me and that reaction and say what's the wise way to say or do this here, like what. And that's a hard thing to do.
So is there a way to correct something that you see as a wrong or something as incorrect? How do you correct that like Jesus would do it? You want to point out that something is wrong, but you want to do it in a loving way that shows Jesus.
What is the right way to react, but not be reactive?
Yeah, well, it's like speaking the truth in love, right? Like I recently interviewed a guy in one of my classes, a social justice class, and so we were talking about gender, and we actually had like a gay Christian. We zoomed him in, and my goal was to have he and I totally disagree. Like our stance on sexuality would be at the opposite ends of the spectrum, but how can we have a real civil discussion?
Right.
How can we model disagreeing, but having that done in a way that doesn't undermine your faith or your witness in some way?
Yep.
So
I think revival would break out on earth if in the West anyway, if the church could just figure out how to respond, like non-anxious, just a non-anxious presence, and like so much of my reactivity is couched in insecurity. I think at the end of the day, it's I gotta fight for my position,
right?
Or I gotta vindicate myself or justify myself, and I find so often, I'm finding that a lot lately, where I'm reacting to things, and if I just pause long enough and think what's actually inciting that in me,
right?
It is actually rooted in an insecurity that's supposed to be fastened in to my identity in Christ. And he can, and back to what you said earlier, Colleen, like the Lord can diffuse so much of the conflict in our marriages if we will just sort of take it to him first before we take it to them.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so much of it is just kind of couched in our own insecurity, and like he can speak to those things and uproot a lot of the issues,
And it's definitely a process. Like we have a lot less conflict in our life, like in our marriage now. But we've been at it a long time.
Right.
And we've just learned, like I've learned what her triggers are, like, and she's learned what not to say to me, or like how to say things in certain ways.
Is it hard not to?
You're just kind of like working with one another rather than
And also, whenever we're having conflict, I try to look at, okay, we're both really committed to the Lord, and we're both equally doing a lot of different things together, but apart also. I do a lot of discipleship, and oftentimes the enemy he's at work. Like the conflict is really not what we're really dealing with. It's the
Right.
enemy.
Yeah.
You know, the enemy knows.
Yeah, there is a spiritual.
You know, there's that spiritual aspect of what's really going on here.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, that's what I find with the two of us is, oh, there's really something else going on here.
The thing behind the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we bought a house one time and moved in, and we were arguing more than, and it just occurred to me one day. I was praying, and it occurred to me, like the couple we bought the house from divorced. They sold the house because they got, and there was literally, I think, a spiritual, like it couldn't force us to do anything, but there was a spiritual atmosphere left in the house that kind of pushed in that direction.
Yep.
And when we stopped and we realized that, and we just went around the house and prayed over each room,
Yep.
it changed the atmosphere.
Yeah. Did you guys? We did that too when we moved into our new home. I brought in some of my heavy hitter guys before we even moved the couch in. We just consecrated the place. And,
Right.
you know, I do think, you know, as we mature in our relationship, we are getting better at. It's definitely not perfect, but we're getting better at recognizing, like, you know, when wait a minute, this is weird. Why are we at each other all over stupid stuff, or why, or maybe even seeing. Sometimes I find it helpful to even see if I'm acting in a controlling manner, or in, like there's things that are dead giveaways that the enemy's actually manipulating something, and it's not actually a legitimate conflict. There's deception happening, and I think the better
We can recognize
we're
it
getting better.
now, I think.
Yeah. Is that something that just keeps developing over time? Like you're
I
not
think,
against
you know,
flesh and blood. You're not my enemy.
As long as you're growing, we've probably been like 6 or 7 different people together. You know what I mean?
Right.
But as long as, and I think what happens sometimes is, you know, things get in, and then people start growing apart, and you know, we're all going to be several people as we move through life, but the important thing is you just committed to moving together through those stages.
A single purpose, and that's the Lord.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If you have that singular purpose,
Yeah.
you can have lots of interests that are different or the same. It's not the same. It's that purpose, and the Lord is that purpose. And vulnerability, like what you were just saying about your identity and insecurity. I find sometimes when we're disagreeing, I don't want to be vulnerable. Like I don't want to really say what's going on. But the more that the deeper I've fallen in love with the Lord, and the deeper I've fallen in love with Mike, the more I know I can trust and put my heart, you know, I can put my heart in his hand, and he's not going to crush it.
Right.
And I can be brutally honest and vulnerable, and be my true self.
That fear keeps us entrenched, doesn't it, and guarded. Like if we can't trust, you know, that is why we end up getting offensive or defensive with offense. But
and I've learned a lot about him. He's a man of few words. This is a funny little thing. I wrote him. I thought, I never asked him to come back for lunch too often. I'm going to write him and see if he'd like to come home for lunch, and I'll make him a smoothie or whatever he wants. And so I said, hey, babe, you want to come home for lunch? You want a smoothie? And he was like, no and no.
Well, I was
like, no. Well,
how you read it and how I wrote it were two different things, right? Because I was like, there's 2 questions.
Yeah.
I'm really busy.
Yeah, no and
I'll give 2 straight answers. No and no.
Makes
Right?
perfect
And
sense.
see,
That makes perfect sense.
and that's just the difference between a guy and a girl, I think, right
you
there.
should have
Right?
seen when he came home. I'm standing at the head of the stairs, and I'm like, no and no, huh? Well, ain't ever asking you home
See
for
if
lunch,
I-
and no more smoothies.
I've tried to say yes and yes for the past several weeks
Yeah.
about different things, so
man.
to make up for the
Still
no.
learning.
Yeah, so always
Still
learn.
learning.
You can always revert back very easily.
Absolutely. Well, Mike, you already spoke to the idea of when, you know, how to not make conflict escalate. And Kevin talks about, again, the value of just pause and be slow to speak, slow to be angry, quick to listen. I think that's a huge key But then they talk about forgiveness and the ability, like when, a lot of our conflict is you did something, you wronged me, and like we need to work through this. And the question I would say is, well, first, did you ever play the offense game where you kind of hold the, like you did this and
Keep score.
I might have done that to you recently, where you sort of hold the you did that to me, and you're gonna have to tell me what you did until I let this go, and that was wrong, and I shouldn't have done that. And we're still learning.
It's a process.
It is. But actually, why don't you hear that quote, hon, where it talks about just pouring gasoline on the fire if we're angry.
Oh yeah, if we're angry and pouring gasoline on the fire, it can be really difficult to back down and forgive the other person. And if we're also keeping score, our desire is often to get the other person to feel the weight of what they've done to us. But that's the opposite of how God treats us. He extends grace to us, and he instructs us to forgive others as he forgives us through Christ.
Yeah, and that's a great quote. I think for you guys, like, how do you understand forgiveness? Like, what is forgiveness? What is that like? Because I think that sometimes there's a lot of confusion around what that is. It means, affirmation, or that you have to agree with me or accept my position. Like, what is forgiveness as you guys come to understand it?
I'm a real big believer in like keeping short accounts, and so I think things pile up and they escalate, and then like the more you do that, then you move into that territory where you're like holding things out, and so and Colleen hasn't always, like, I usually try to force, if we have conflict, I will like not go to bed until I will force resolution somehow, like we have to
Don't let the sun
don't let things build up. And so I think that kind of short circuits that process where you Colleen mentioned her parents like earlier, and they were great to us, like we love them, but they really obviously had let such mountains build up that they couldn't get to a place of forgiveness on them, and you could see that looking on, but they couldn't see it, and that was kind of like a cautionary tale of like, just don't. And so my parents tended to have like big knockdown, drag out fights, but then it was over.
They get it flattened out.
So that was like, yeah, and and it even, like, I remember as a kid. Like, I remember my mom picking up like a glass, throwing it at my father. Like, he ducked, and we lived 3 stories up. It went through the window and like down onto the street and broke. And like that was, but then like half an hour later, they were like, "Yeah, you want a sandwich?" And so it's like,
we're good now.
We're good now, right?
Yeah. Did you guys? Let me ask that question. Did you guys, like, with your own conflict? How did you work that out in front of the kids? Did they see much headbutting, or is that more? Is any glass thrown through windows? Or?
No, we're fiery people, though. I remember there was another couple at the college, and our 2 older girls used to say, "Why can't you be like Marilyn and Danny?" Because they were like lovey-dovey all the time. But I mean, they also grew up with Christian backgrounds and everything. And Mike and I were just trying to slug it out and figure out with the Lord how things were. No, I think we're fiery personalities, but once again, he disarms a lot of things with humor. Like, he'll only go so long. He says what he has to say, and he puts it right out there, where I'm more in it. I could carry things longer, but I realize that I'm not getting anywhere, and he forces me into, come on, let's, like, what is it? He's very much a truth sayer. I like to avoid it sometimes.
Yeah. Well, definitely if it means giving up our position, right? But there must be a bit of an art, though, to, you've mentioned already, like the use of humor. There's probably a line where it's like what satire does. It gives a different angle, telling the truth. Right. It might even like de-escalate a little bit, like, come on, like let's just laugh about this. It's not a big deal. But there might have been times, though, where it really like minimized something that actually did really matter. And like how have you navigated that? You know, Kevin talks about the practice of gratitude as a mechanism to help deal with kind of letting things go. You've used humor, but is that, I feel like, I don't know if I would try to get folks tonight who are watching to like, hey, next time your wife's mad at you, just make a joke.
Tell her how cute she
Make
is.
a joke. And tell
No,
her,
no.
Tell her she's flirting.
I feel like that's setting them up for disaster.
Yeah.
We have been at this a long time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up on Monty Python, so it's colored my whole view of reality.
Mike's
so
got the
it's like-
coconuts.
So usually, if I know if I can get her to laugh though,
Yeah.
like if I know that we're like heading past the
Right.
danger point if I can
Right.
get her to laugh.
Right.
So, so yeah.
You know when to pull the trigger on
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
when it's
yeah,
too ripe yet to
And I do know that I can trust him. Like I've gone through so many years of seeing him just say, giving me the leeway. If you don't like this, you let me know. If you need me more here, you let me know. And there's a funny story. We were at a camp in Ontario, had all 4 kids.
Well, this is one thing you should never. This is a pro tip. Okay, one thing you should never do is like sell a house, put all your furniture in storage, go on the road for like the whole
The new
summer with your
baby.
whole family, and then arrive back at your job in the fall with nowhere to live.
Oh man, no place to just like let.
Right.
We left our house the end of April, and we never found another place to live until almost the end of September.
We spent some times with 6 of us in a hotel room.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which Mike proceeded to tell the children, who else owns a pool, kids?
Yeah.
There's a hot
Two
tub.
bed, 2 rooms. We were living in 2 rooms, 2 adjoining rooms, and I
But anyway,
thought,
you were going to tell like putting me up against the wall. Right?
Yes.
This is
Yes.
conflict.
Okay.
it was conflict resolution. He was-
Silver Lake Camp.
Yeah, he was playing in the woods, and I could. And
It was
and
youth camp.
It
I
was
gotta
youth
play,
camp,
part of
and
my
they were
job.
playing capture the flag or capture the camp speaker, and I heard them all say, "Here he is! Here's Mike in the woods!" And I thought, Mike in the woods, Mike in the woods. I'm gonna kill Mike in the woods right about now. I've just bathed my 3rd child, and my mother died. I have no mother. I can't call my mother. I have no house because we sold my house. I don't even know where I'm at.
What
I
state
can't
am I
even
in?
leave. So I packed all the suitcases, and he just happened to pop by the cabin. All the suitcases are all lined up, and the kids I'm getting ready to put them all in the van, and I'm going somewhere. I don't know where, but I'm leaving him there. And he walked in, and he goes, where are you going? And I said, I'm leaving. And he goes, you are? And I said, I am. And then I turned around and I grabbed him by the sweatshirt and I put him up against the wall and I said, if you ever do this to me again, I literally will kill you. He just looked at me and he goes, babe, what do we need to do? And I'm like, wait a minute, he should be mad at me. I just like
was the
knocked
water
him right up
bucket.
against the wall.
What's that?
That was the water
was
bucket.
the water
See,
bucket.
I would have taken the gas. I would have said, I'm here doing the Lord's work.
Leave. You would have just
And this
told me to
isn't
go.
helping.
Yeah.
No, he literally said to me, what do you need of me right now?
Wow.
I'll go tell the camp that I need to leave. My wife needs me. Well, what was I going to do then? It was like, oh, shucks, couldn't
Well
you just...
played.
But the moral of the story is that some people may be more connected to homes than you are.
Yes.
So don't just use a little bit. I don't think I would do that today. I think I have more wisdom today.
Wow.
So last sort of part of this, like he does talk a lot about. They talked about a lot of forgiving one another, and then even going beyond that and seeking restoration, and that's even harder than saying I'm choosing to not be offended. It's actually stepping in and working towards healing. You know, what for you guys, I guess, are keys to live in that space of being not just someone who can forgive and live in that place, whether it's in your marriage or whether it's in your lives, how do you practice forgiveness, like letting go of offense, and then even going farther than that and offering grace and restoration? What's the key for you? I mean, Jesus.
Right.
Well, I just did a Lisa Turkis study, How to Forgive What You Can't Forget.
Wow.
Let me tell you, that is one incredible study. And she's got great wisdom. And she talks about pre-forgiveness. We have to live in an attitude of forgiveness at all times. Before an offense ever happens, we have to decide in our lives that unforgiveness is not an option for me. And I thought, that is so true. It isn't an option. If I'm going to live right with God, and I need to be able to forgive. So no matter if it's somebody else or if it's my husband, then I need to be able to forgive.
Yeah.
It's not an option. And so, with my will, I decide, and I ask the Lord to let the feelings come. And that's the process, right?
Yeah, so much what we do is driven by feelings, I think. And and feelings are real, and you can't just like deny them, but they make very poor leaders.
Yes.
And so like whatever the trouble with making something optional is then you choose it as an option.
Right.
So I think that is there's just certain non-negotiables, like as a Christian, and forgiveness would be one of them. Like I cannot live. And living in unforgiveness is not an option.
Yeah.
No matter, I have to work at it. If I'm holding something against somebody, I just have to figure out a way. Like God help me to get there.
Yeah.
Because unforgiveness, like it literally is more destructive to us.
Yes.
Than to anybody else.
Yeah.
And so it's like it's the same kind of thing as like why don't you do drugs? Well, because I know that they're destructive.
It's destructive.
And so it's not an option.
Yeah.
And we have to look at some of those things like unforgiveness in the same way. I think in different like that's not a real struggle for me. If anything, like just because of the way I grew up, I think like if I have a struggle, it's with pride. Like it's more with like always thinking I'm right.
Right.
Always having like. That's something I have to work at a lot harder than forgiveness. But everybody has their different issues, right?
Yeah, with how they're wired.
Yeah.
I do think our feelings, you make such a good point. It's like gravitationally pulled towards wanting to hold on to bitterness. Your feelings will lead you in that direction, but it's kind of, unforgiveness and bitterness is similar to social media. No one ever uses it and then feels like that was a great investment, or I'm so glad that I held on to my bitterness for 10 days or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's always after the fact, you're like, I wish I didn't do that.
Yeah, well, I mean, cancer and bitterness spread, right?
Yeah.
You let them go. Like, and so just even thinking about it in those terms, if you substitute cancer in for something else, it's kind of like, do I really want to do I really want to hold on to this? Because it's going to grow.
Really, it's an objective decision, really, and it's actually trying to make that objective decision, like you said, before the subjective feelings, kind of to try to dictate your response.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I love what you said, that you make the choice to forgive, and then that you pray the feelings will follow.
Yeah, yeah,
That's big, because if you wait to feel forgiveness, it might take a while.
Yeah.
Wow, and just in almost every area. Like if you're running on feelings, you're going to have a bumpy ride.
Yeah.
And I find with almost everything that if I decide to do the right thing, and then I make myself do it, like the feelings will come after.
You're right.
But they're not.
True.
Yeah.
But I don't start with the feelings. Like I don't wake up in the morning feeling like serving God. Like I wake up feeling like watching Netflix or doing something, but if I do serve God, I'm always glad at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like I always have those feelings at the end of the day.
Right.
and if I just followed my feelings, I wouldn't.
Right.
It wouldn't take me to good places, right?
Health always seems to come after what's hard. You know, it's
Yeah.
like the hard thing, and then health follows it, and the kingdom follows. You know,
Yeah.
that intentionality, and which
Well,
is
and that's one of the key differences, I think, between God and what God and Satan try to do. And I'm like, Satan makes everything easy up front,
right.
and then you pay the price as you go. Like the
Yes.
price gets more and more costly.
That's right.
God makes stuff hard up front,
And it gets more.
but it gets the
Better.
blessings come. It gets better and better
Yeah.
as it goes.
And you do see, I mean, you talk about the world, the culture that we live in today. It very much is like what is the least responsibility that I can personally take? What is the easiest thing for me? And I think taking that into a marriage, some of the, just follow your heart, and I got to stay true to myself, and I'm going to speak my truth to you right now. I mean,
Right.
that is recipe for
Yeah.
disaster
Yeah.
in your marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it all, like, again, those Christian cliches, but it really comes down to like selfishness, right?
Yeah.
And the two greatest cures for selfishness are marriage and children, I think.
Yeah.
Like, I think those are God's tools to
Yeah. And if you're-
root the selfishness out of us, right?
Yeah, you're right. You're
Yeah.
right. Well, guys, any final advice you'd give to the listeners today? What if you could kind of send them out with any kind of? You've given a ton of gold, really. I mean, but any final thoughts other than get yourself a mentor and a praying wife?
I would say, I would say that the key to love is just always putting the other person first, and and if you've got that straight, like all of the other stuff is gonna eventually take care of itself.
Yeah.
And it's, and when we put ourselves first, that derails things and takes us in bad directions. And if we can always just consciously be thinking what is the best thing for this other person? Like, how can I put their needs first? Then all of the specific kind of things that can go wrong are gonna be taken care of, because you've got the core issue settled.
The hard thing.
Yeah, the hard thing.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that the Lord cannot fix in our lives.
Yeah.
I've personally experienced that. We've experienced it as a couple. We've just been so privileged, so privileged to have God in our lives, and people lead us to Christ at an early age. And it's just been the most magnificent life.
Yeah.
Really has. I am an advocate for Jesus.
I know you are.
Yeah.
And he, I know so many people that they've got some issues in their marriage and different things, and I just want to encourage you. There's nothing the Lord cannot fix. There is nothing.
Yeah.
Just hold tight to him. Pray, come together, and trust God. Trust that he can change things, and he will.
Yeah. Yeah. You guys have seen God's grace invade your lives, and because of that, it's invaded countless other people's lives too. And it's cool to see. I wonder, actually, Colleen, would you pray for the marriages here, that God's specifically just that, let's just agree with God's heart for them, that the Lord is, I think of Jesus saying, I stand at the door and knock. There are doors that he's actually trying to access in their lives and in their marriages to actually bring healing and health and hope and joy and integrity and all the stuff that we can't manufacture.
Yeah.
So I'd love it if you'd pray for
absolutely.
everybody tonight before we end off.
Well, Lord, this has been an awesome time, just sitting here chatting together and just lifting your name, and we give you all the glory. And we know that, Lord, it is because of you that we have these marriages that are awesome. They're not easy, but they sure are good. And we just invite you into each and every couple that are watching and that will watch this podcast. We just ask, Lord, that you would work miracles in their lives, that they would see as they submit their hearts to you, that, Lord, you will answer their prayers, and that you will make a way sometimes where there seems to be no way, Lord, that you are a powerful God, and there is nothing that you cannot change, that you cannot reconcile. So we pray for these marriages, Lord. Make them stronger and more committed than ever. And we thank you, God, for each and every person that has watched and been involved in this couples therapy. And we ask that your blessing would continue on them and their families, Lord, and that you would move them forward into mighty and greater things in the days to come.
Yes, Lord.
In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I could do this for another hour with you.
I know, it's so, I just want to sit here and soak
I
it
get to
in.
talk on sex.
We've enjoyed it.
Well,
Let's do another hour.
Let's do it.
We watched the wrong chapter one time, and I was like, okay, we could do this.
Yes.
Yeah, we need to do the
We'll
sex
add
talk.
another week.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit last week, but not
Smidge,
much. You know,
They didn't have a whole chapter on it.
They didn't. No, they didn't get to do it too much.